it is, TAW Unwrapped. For those long enough in the tooth within the Anfield Wrap to know, this is a familiar name for a show. We have used this name before, but it's going to be in a new format now, hosted by me, Josh Sexton, where we're going to be delving into some of the bigger talking points across Liverpool and the football world. And we're starting with almost an emergency version of this show today, because it's been a big talking point in the Liverpool world. I'm sure you lads who are across all this kind of stuff on social media will know full well there's been a bit of discourse over the last few days about the Federico Chiesa song. I've got Craig Hannan, John Gibbons and Kieran Molyneux with me to sort of talk through this, because Craig, me and you have had a couple of sort of private discussions about this, really, because I have to acknowledge my own bias within this conversation. I did a tweet after the game, after Chiesa scored in the game on Friday night, with the sort of a crying emojis around the city of Turin, and I remember walking out the ground when I was thinking of doing that tweet and being like, in the way that I sort of always have that filter of when you post anything on social media, is this the sort of thing that could backfire? And I remember thinking about like Heysel, like the thought of that crossed my mind, because there definitely is the argument that these lyrics are, close to the bone in terms of the history that's happened between Liverpool and Juventus. And basically the reason I decided to pull the trigger on the tweet in the end was that I think there is enough separation there. It's a song about a lad who's left his old club. The whole point of it is that it's basically meant to be his monologue of what he was saying to Juventus as he left. And I understand that to some people it feels like it's too close to the bone. For me, I felt like it was good to do that. And then there's been a lot of reaction on social media in the past few days. I'm wondering what you're sort of making of the whole of it before we delve more into sort of finer details of it.
I mean, the song's been sung for probably, it's been around for about 10 months now, and it's probably been sung by everyone and celebrated on social media for about 5 or 6 months. And obviously, you see at the end of the season with Chiesa singing it himself. He's asked about the song on the bus. There's been sort of no discourse up until now. I think with any song, and any song historically, when fans have sung a song and there's been a set of people or a group of people who have said that it's made them feel something in a certain way negatively, or it's evoked emotions from something, then I'm always someone to listen to it, or want to listen to it and to understand it. And obviously, I am of an age group who I know what happened to Heysel. I understand what happened to Heysel. Every year it's part of my role to make sure that nothing goes out on the anniversary on the 29th, and it's part of my job to post about it late on the 28th about some of the brilliant content the Anfield Wrap's done over the years to help educate people and to give a full view of what happened to Heysel. Not once in my life singing the Federico Chiesa song have I ever thought about it as a song or linked it to Heysel. And that might be a little bit naive, and there'll be people here who maybe were there or are of a certain age group who feel a certain way about what happened at that and have been affected by that and all of that. So I know there's going to be things that we all say in this conversation where at some point someone's going to be listening and watching and go he doesn't fucking understand, or that's naive or whatever. But I may have been naive in that I've sung this song for a long period of time, and I know there's discourse that's come out over the past few days. Tony Evans written an article, Cy Hughes has written an article today. I don't think it changes how I feel about the song, and people will be listening and watching and say they may be angry or whatever, but I don't feel indifferent because I've never sung that song thinking about that. I am someone who was unaffected, who wasn't born. I'm someone who's grown up reading about it. I remember the first time I read about it, and you got the thick history books that you used to get, and I remember reading about it. There was a whole section on it. I remember listening to the Anfield Wrap content all at the time, but I've never linked the two, and that's sort of where I stand on it at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, that Craig sort of mentions there that he's never made the sort of, the link between the two, between the words of that song and between, what happened at Heysel. And I think, I've acknowledged there that even before doing the tweet I put out over the weekend, I was making the link, I had that understanding that it was close to the bone. I guess almost the angle I'm approaching it from in my brain, and why I felt like that was, okay to do in that moment, and why I feel like, I don't feel any sort of shame in singing the song, is that, I was born 10 years after Heysel, so I understand that it's a shame and it's a black mark on Liverpool's history, and I understand why, the people who were there will feel a way about it, because they're obviously, scarred by the events that happened that day as much as, the people who were even more closely affected, would feel like that, because there's all sorts of things that we know from Hillsborough in terms of people's survivors' guilt and things like being a part of those disasters that have happened in stadiums does come with that real level of just almost like a real trauma attached to them. Like I guess what I'm trying to get at from my personal point of view is like I wasn't there, and for a thing that happened 10 years before I was born, like for some people to feel the level of shame around to the point they don't feel comfortable singing a song about a player leaving this same club, and even if again I acknowledge the words to me are a little bit close to the bone of what could be perceived as that's just us basically slagging Juventus as a football club. Like I almost don't feel like I should have to operate under the same amount of shame, really. Like I wasn't there. It's 10 years after I was born. It's even though it's a big sort of event, as Craig acknowledged, in Liverpool's history. Like it's just not a big event as such in my lifetime. I don't know if I sound insensitive in saying that. I'm trying not to.
I don't think you do, because I don't think we want a group of people to live with something forever that has happened. And it's like, you look at something like the World War II, where, I've been to some England games and stuff like that in tournaments, and people are singing about the war and you're just cringing. You're like, why are you doing this? Just sort of move on. And so I wouldn't ever expect someone who was born in the, German person who's born in the 90s to feel guilt about like what had happened and stuff like that, because, obviously it's a slightly different situation now, because it's to a normal world. It's not just sort of governments. They were elected by the people, albeit, in kind of, very strange circumstances. But I think, what I'm getting at is if you're a German person who was born in 1920s, who supported that party, maybe not necessarily knowing everything around it, you would hold an element of guilt sort of with you if you sort of lived through that. But if you're a German born in 1960, then no one in the right mind would say you need to feel guilty for the country you're born in, or sort of where you're from or anything like that. So I'm pleased that people who are 20, 30 years old aren't sort of carrying around this guilt, because it's like an awful way to live. That's not to say that it shouldn't be remembered, and it is remembered by the club. It's remembered by the Anfield Wrap, as Craig said, because you remember things out of, you remember things so it doesn't happen again. And the best reason to keep anything with you is to learn from that experience, and is to learn from the fact that you might think this is just a fight, or you might think you're just running at someone or whatever, but there's consequences that can sort of happen. And so the Heysel is important to keep with us, not just because of the memory of the people who died and the people who were affected, and it's a respectful thing to do that, but also like hooliganism isn't a laugh. Do you know what I mean? And ironically, some of the people who were kicking off a bit about this, are quite happy to sort of, talk about the good old days of all that. Is my opinion. Maybe that's a bit of a blanket statement, but, hooliganism isn't all laugh. It's not something necessarily to be just sung about and kind of, encouraged or painted as this like wonderful period in football history, in Liverpool's history or whatever. There was people hurt and people died, and we need to sort of remember it. And so I just think, I don't want people, of who were not even born then, who weren't there, I don't think it's fair to say that they need to carry, this guilt around with them. Yeah, remember it. Yeah, it's something that the football club needs to remember, and it's something that it's a dark day for the football club, and they need to own it, but not the people who support it or choose to support it, who have all been born into this football club years later. I think that's just no healthy way to live.
Yeah, Keo, John mentions the sort of almost the problem with blanket statements around any of this, and I think that's one of the other problems I've had, particularly with the discourse in recent days. Really, is this idea of like just the certain level of assumption around it. Like I completely understand, just as Craig said before, if there's someone who was at Heysel who is in the ground and doesn't feel comfortable singing that Chiesa song, I think you're probably going to struggle, and listen, the sentiment might change over the coming days and weeks. Now there's probably every chance, even with the fact that we're giving this a platform to discuss it between us, that the club might say something at some point. People have got onto in the last few days that on the sort of inside Anfield things, the club tends to just use the bounce in the middle and rather than the actual lyrics. And maybe that is because of what John was saying there. They sort of want to make sure that there is none of that attached to it from their point of view. They want to make sure they're respecting the memories of the people who died at Heysel. They want to make sure they're focusing on repairing relationships even still to this day with Juventus, because of course Liverpool played them in 2005 and had the Amasija banner on the Kop and things like that. But it'd be hard to say for everybody that those relationships are repaired. But I also can't say there are Juventus fans in my echo chamber, for example. But I almost think like until there are Juventus fans saying like we're not okay with this, then I'm sort of all right. I don't know if I feel like I'm all right to plough on. That is obviously like it's a slippery slope in a way. But
completely agree. Before this show, there was some homework and seen that Football Italia actually reported on this in May about the new Chiesa song at Anfield, and there's no mention of Heysel. I've not heard anything from Juventus supporters groups. I've not heard anything from Italian media or even anyone around football in Italy that this is a major problem in Italy. What you're saying is wrong, and ultimately, it's, in my opinion, it's because it's not. I mean, you can say it a blanket statement. I'm not going to tell anyone how to feel. We've done this a few times already over the past few months. People can feel however they want.
Yeah.
But for me, the link to Heysel is coming from people trying to link it to Heysel. The lyrics, you say, could be controversial. Is it controversial if the next line is about a football player? I've seen the links to Always the Victims, which I don't agree with, because we know what that's in reference to, and it's not about a football player. This is about one of our football players. We haven't said anything about Heysel in the song. So we need to be careful, because I do feel as if this is now brewing because people are linking it to Heysel when it's not linked to Heysel. So I'm not going to tell anyone how to feel, but I do think that trying to compare it to Always the Victims is dangerous. And I think, in reference to Tony Evans' article saying fuck off Liverpool, I'm a South Yorkshire policeman now, is very dangerous.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Gibbo, is from that Tony article, there's been the Cy Hughes one that Craig mentioned as well. I've not had a chance to read through that yet, but Tony makes the sort of really direct and apparent link between the Always the Victims thing. And I always go back to a tweet you made a couple of years ago, because you probably articulated something I felt about that song better than I felt like I could at the time, and it's now a sentiment that I take forward with me, is the idea of opposition fans being able to pick and choose whether Always the Victims, it's never your fault, is about the Patrice Evra incident or about sort of any other incident throughout Liverpool's history, and ignore the only time where Liverpool fans were the victims and it definitely wasn't their fault, and that there were lies that stuck around, not only just in a football sense, in a political sense in this country for so many years to come. Like, that is a song that's about Liverpool fans, and I'm telling opposition fans whenever I speak to them about it, or we are as Liverpool fans in a sort of public collective sense saying to opposition fans, that's the song you're saying about us and we don't think that's okay. Look, where I agree with Keo is that this is a song ultimately that's about Federico Chiesa. It's not really about Juventus or their fans. Their fans aren't mentioned in it. There's it says the lyrics that you can hear them crying in Turin, and that it alludes that Chiesa has told Juventus to fuck off. Like, that to me is like, it's not as pointed as Always the Victims, for example. And also, like, still, as Keo says, there's not been Juventus fan groups that have come out in the same way there were Liverpool fan groups who have come out in the same way that the Premier League, even back Liverpool fans down the years to sort of try and stop tragedy chanting and stop songs like that in particular being sort of wheeled out at football grounds now. Like, that does feel like the kickback of us saying we're not okay with that, and maybe like the assumption, like I don't know, the assumption that Juventus fans are not going to feel all right with that doesn't necessarily sit well with me, because how do we know?
Listen, there'll be Juventus fans out there who are calling us cunts, but I've got news for you, they were calling us cunts already.
Exactly.
Like, it's not a positive relationship. You mentioned there 2005. I'm probably the only one around here who was there that night who sort of remembers that as a thing that I was actively involved in. There's some Juventus fans at the front clapped, large numbers of them turned their backs and put double fingers up, and there was animosity towards that from Liverpool supporters as well. So it's not sort of a healthy relationship, but that was 20 years ago, and so there's a lot of Liverpool fans who are going now, including sat around with me, who weren't really part of that, and Juventus just aren't a reference point for them. Maybe they should be, but it's not like a rivalry, like, it's not good a domestic one, but even like Real Madrid or whatever, who we've played a lot, like it's just sort of not on the radar, and so that needs to be remembered. As someone who was born when Heysel was on, I was free, so I don't remember watching it, but I had all the videos from the 80s that I got quite quickly, so I knew about it. I was obviously around in 2005. I was there in the ground, and so I was part of that. So I'm more aware, I guess, than you guys of the journey and of the story, because I lived a chunk of it, if not the most important chapter. I'll be completely honest. The first time I heard the song, I was like, "Ooh!" Like it didn't.
That's interesting.
It surprised me.
That
It
is
shocked me, and I was a bit like, "Oh, not sure about that." And I wouldn't say I was like, you know, I wasn't say I was angry or whatever, but I was a bit like, there was something about Liverpool fans singing "fuck off Juve" that didn't sit right with me, is what I would say. So that's me being honest. And then, you know, and then a bit more on the lyrics, and it's, you know, the crying in Kieran, and I was just like, that's not quite right either. And, you know, but then the song sort of takes off and everyone's enjoying it, and you almost don't want to be that guy really. And you think, well, there's people older than me singing it, like everyone sings it at the ground, you know, and I haven't ever seen anyone go like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this or whatever. So I think, well, maybe, you know, if it didn't sit right with me, but everyone else is singing it, and first of all, you don't want to be the guy who's like, oh, you know, come on, should we change the lyrics or whatever, because who am I to do that? But at the same time, you think, well, maybe you're just being a bit sensitive on it or something like that. Maybe you're just looking too much into it. So
being careful, to be honest.
Yeah. So I've just sort of like left it and thought, well, and then like you say, it's obviously a song about a player. It's obviously a song about a situation, and in a way, it's unfortunate that it's the club that we've got the sort of history with. But knowing who wrote it, I can't see personally. You know, he's come out and said, oh, he wrote it in like 10 minutes and never thought it would took off. You know what I mean? It's not something that he's done out of this big grand plan like most
and it's also someone who understands like intrinsically the culture of Liverpool, the city, and the fan culture.
Well, yeah, it's Anfield, and I'm fine to say his name because he said he literally wrote a book on it. You know, when people say, well, he wrote a book on that, he wrote a book called Local, where he spoke to people across the city about the relationship between. So he understands football culture. So he'd have, you know, known all about that and has done this, you know, would have been in a harmless way. And so I went on a bit of a journey from the song, from being a bit unsure about it, just because it, you know, sometimes you hear something and it just triggers you a little bit, to then go, well, actually, you know, everyone else is all right with it, and it's clearly about this player, and he really enjoys it, so fine. So I'd sort of like forgotten about my initial negative reaction to it, but I understand that other people have kept that, and it's probably people who were at Heysel and maybe got a stronger, you know, an even stronger guttural reaction. So I get certain people who are going like, I'm not sure. I understand that. What's really annoyed me is the lack of goodwill towards our own supporters by people who profess to be.
This is what I mean. People trying to make out that has been done for bad when it completely hasn't, has it?
But also haven't tried to educate or haven't tried to engage with it in a positive way. Haven't gone straight away. Listen, when it was early, and maybe it's because they don't go to the match anymore, or maybe it's because, I don't know, they just sort of sat and stewed on it, I don't know. But the time to have these conversations for me,
it's in the pubs before it
was early, do you know what I mean? Like, it would just go. So there's examples of this happening. There's loads of lyrics that have been changed. I remember when Spirits of Shankly started, it was called Sons of Shankly, and someone went, hang on, what if women want to join? And someone else went, yeah, fair play, well, we'll change it to Spirits of Shankly. There wasn't this big, oh, who are you calling sexist? You know what I mean? There wasn't this big row. It was people being reasonable, going like, yeah, I understand Sons of Shankly, listen, it was probably all fellas at the first meeting or whatever, but someone's gone at some point, like, shouldn't this be a bit more inclusive? Yeah. And they've said it in a way that people have gone, yeah, do you know what, you're right. What's the harm of changing Sons to Spirit? Like, what's the harm of changing fuck off to something else? And then it's gone, and then no one even really, you know, talks about it anymore, and it sort of happens. And so, for me, what's annoying me most is the timing, and also the lack of goodwill towards Liverpool supporters, because it's been hard. It's been hard recently. Like, there's been so much sort of, you know, going on. You know, we win the league, and that's amazing, and then you get the parade and everything around that, and people driving into people, and, you know, it was amazing. They turned into a horrible day, and there was people there with the kids. There's kids got injured, and then you're getting over that, and no one's died, and then the Jota thing happens, and then you go into the first day of the season, and there's all that sadness around that, and then there's fucking some prick being racist, and you're like, why the fuck are you doing this to me? Well, to everyone, to all of us, you know, why are you doing this? Fucking not any night, but certainly not tonight. And then you get this let off, and Chiesa scores the winner, and then the song goes, and then everyone's made up, and then someone just decides to go, nah, you fucking, not just you shouldn't be singing it, but like going on the aggressive, saying
what's
you're
done
all
my
dicks,
head in.
you don't know what you're talking about, you're all thick, and it's... And
Someone who wasn't in the ground, by the way.
A lot of these people are saying, like, is it because... I don't want to pin it all on Tony, you know, I like Tony, do you know what I mean? And I think, like, Tony's lived through these things and they've obviously affected them. So I don't want to sort of, but he's obviously had the most attention because he's got the platform. But there's other people who I just don't think are giving any goodwill to the people who are singing it and people are there. And I'm not trying to speak to engaging them in any meaningful way or positive way. They just want to call anyone who's singing it, you know, out of order, a prick, you know, thick, whatever it is. And I just think you're not going to change people's minds that way. They're just going to, like, double down and they're just going to go, like, you know, because no one wants to be accused of all the things that they're being accused of, or like disrespecting Hillsborough and stuff like that.
That's why I think I'm
so they're just going to go like, nah, fuck off, it's nothing to do with that, and we're going to keep singing it. So it's not a good way to win an argument, but also I think with everything that Liverpool fans have been through, I think it is out of order, and I think we all deserve a lot more goodwill. You know, I mean, I haven't even brought up Paris. The last time we were in a Champions League final, you know, everything that happened around there, it's been a tough time, and it's a club where there's been a lot of tragedies involved in it, and obviously Heysel is one of those, so we do need to be mindful of it, but I just think we just need to cut each other a little bit of slack, and we're all meant to be on the same team, we're all meant to be the same fan base, and I think it's not the people I'm going to write to question certain lyrics, it's when they've done it and how they've done it, and the fact that it just feels sometimes like you're not allowed to have any fun. It just feels like you're not allowed to enjoy it. Like even last minute winners or late winners on the first day of the season has to turn into this big thing and has to turn into this big argument and has to turn into, let's be honest, generally older fellas telling younger people that they're not supporting the club, right? And I just think fuck off.
Especially when there's other songs in our songbook which is still sang on coaches and pubs, which do go out other teams and like can get a little bit close to the bone. But we've decided to like pick the Chiesa song and make sure this one isn't sang and try and make this one seem bad. There's songs out there which are still sang by some people in pubs and in bars and on buses, which are a little bit close to the bone and which shouldn't make it to the cop. You can take any line out of any song or any book or any poem and you can take it out of context. And if you just take the crying in Turin line and you send that over to Italy, then they're going to have a problem with it. But if they say crying in Turin because we signed Chiesa off you, it's not a fucking problem.
Well, I think John used the word reasonable, and I think that's, with anything like this, I always think, like, what does a reasonable, rational human being, if they take this at face value, as you have said, what do they think that song's about? Whenever they watch a video or they're in the ground of 60, however number thousand people in any ground that Liverpool are in, but say Anfield at the weekend, and they see those people singing that song, does a reasonable, rational person look at that group of supporters and all the countless, like hundreds of thousands all over the world who have sung that song in their supporter communities, wherever else, if they look at that and go, yeah, they're singing that about that, or there's even a large minority singing about that, I don't think that's fair or reasonable. There may be some people who have, and there probably is a select few who have feelings towards Juventus, who live through that, and they may sing fuck off Juve with some vigor or with some venom or whatever, but I just don't feel like there is a large group of supporters there, and even a large minority of supporters there that are singing that. I think when Cy Hughes' piece, he talks about always the victims and about United fans singing that. Now, I've been in Old Trafford countless times where always the victims get sung and then you hear the sun was right, you're murderers. Yeah. Now, if you ask, and I have Man United supporting fans, and if you ask them, come on, right, between me and you, when you're singing that song, like what he's talking about there, it's because it's not just Evra or Suarez, because it's always, the word always is there, and the word victims is a word that has been used to sort of tarnish and talk about Liverpool as a city countless times. So there's real sort of like, there's that song packs a punch in numerous different ways, and it'll evoke different emotions about different things. It's not just about the Evra and Suarez thing, and so I think if a reasonable, rational person looks at them singing in Old Trafford as an example, and that might sound it might sound like I'm being tribal here. It might sound like I'm looking at it through the Liverpool sort of prism. The thing I've said, over the last couple of days is, we were looking on Juventus forums earlier because I didn't want to come on here and talk about this and then be like, well, I haven't seen anything because you're in your echo chamber of Liverpool. But like, there just hasn't. There's been no stories. They haven't come from Italy. I was going through the forums and they talk about the song, but they don't mention Heysel. They talk about basically they're all going, oh, we don't care. wish him well. They haven't. No one's linked it.
So that's on this as well. By the way, if there was someone in Italy which had a problem with it, or heard the line crying in Turin and raised the issue, the conversation is, mate, it's not about that. We're well past that. We're singing about our player. We're not in that mindset no more where we're singing about tragedies or we're singing about Heysel. It's got absolutely nothing to do with it. And I repeat, you can take any line out of any song and you can probably find a way to cause some offence. But look at it as a whole. What is the song about? Does it mention Heysel or does it reference it? The answer is no.
You know, what was going to end with saying was basically I've sung that song and not once thought about Heysel, and so my conscience is clear in terms of like the reasons why I sing that song. And I would imagine there's a large, as I said, there's the vast majority of people who have sung that song have sung it not thinking about that. And it was interesting you saying that and mentioning that. Like that when you first heard it, you thought, it didn't even cross my mind. You know, we were in Chelsea and Brighton and celebrating Liverpool winning the league and we're singing this song and not once did I think about it. But I've read all the stuff that the Anfield Wrap have done about Heysel. I understand the tragedy. It's, as I said earlier, it's my job to do the stuff around this. So you know, it's like, this is a hard thing to come on and talk about, to be honest, because like there'll be people watching what I've just said or what I've said earlier and go, well, he's not from Liverpool and he doesn't understand what's going on. And he's out of touch and all of that. And like, I just think you just need to like, we all just need to approach this, as you say, in like a way where you take everyone at face value, and their sort of reasons behind singing a song like this is because it's a fucking belter song and it's one of the best that we've come up with.
I just want to say on that as well, because I mentioned before, there's probably even a difference in the way me and you have approached it really, and that you've not made that connection at all. I did make the connection and still feel like my conscience clear in singing it, because while I respect the memory of the people who died at Heysel, you know, respect the fact that it is a black mark on Liverpool's history. Like, I wasn't there. I've never had a fight at a football game. Like, I don't have to feel any remorse for, you know, the things that hooliganism led to down the years, as John was saying, because like I didn't commit those crimes. Like a group of people who I have like a common interest in Liverpool Football Club. You know, even if you want to interpret it as that, you know, there's Liverpool fans there who you know, committed crimes that day and justice was brought to them. And I was thinking again about that song that, you know, look, I think it's mostly United fans really, as you've sort of been saying, but the whole justice for the 39 thing. And I was like, those people were brought to justice. So again, like the idea that people are carrying forward that remorse and then putting that onto younger generations of people. And I'll come back to you on this.
That's point scoring. That's not word. That's not this. This is celebrating.
Yeah.
You know. This is not points.
This is what I'm saying about the false equivalences. Like the thing that's got under my skin the most, John. I want to come to you because you mentioned about that goodwill point is the sort of strength of feeling in all directions. Like the Tony Evans piece directly references the meme that I made off the back of that, basically, because I'm someone who's not making a connection between and you know, actively not making a connection between the Chiesa song and what happened in Heysel, because again, like I don't carry that remorse, but I don't have any personal vendetta towards Tony because of that. Like, even though it's literally the picture that I made on my phone as I was walking out the ground that's in his article. So like the idea that people are jumping on Tony's back for that, I understand, because, you know, people feel like they're being accused of something they definitely don't feel like they're guilty of. But again, it comes back to that goodwill point of like, can't we all just cut each other a little bit of slack? Like, I really wish in the first instance that Tony cut a load of people slack. I wish that in general, you know, I had a fellow comment on my Instagram over the weekend, and I don't even know if I should platform it really, but I'll just say it, sort of, you know, telling me to fuck off and calling me a Cheshire Wool and stuff like that. So again, it comes back to that thing that Craig's saying about how this becomes ostracising. And, you know, the impression I got from looking at this fella's profile was that he was probably an Ard Scouse fella who felt like me and people like me are a part of the reason that the fan culture feels so far away from what he used to sort of, you know, witness when he went to Liverpool games and things like that. So like the strength of feeling on all sides has been probably the thing that's upset me the most off the back of this, really, because it definitely is a time when we should be united, like, given everything that's happened. It's definitely a time when we should be united behind this footballer who's had, you know, a challenging Liverpool career so far. You know, we talked in quotes that came out after the game about the physios that have helped him out through his challenging past year. It seems that he's taken a complete U-turn on his future at Liverpool as well, and wants to stay at the club and help us fight to win trophies and stuff like that now. And like, I ultimately just want to celebrate that footballer in whichever way I can. I sort of disagree with what Keo said before in the sense of, like, if there were Juve fan groups coming out and being like, we're not okay with this song, you know, I probably wouldn't even want to sit there and argue with them. I'd probably be like, I'm going to pack in doing that now because you've told me.
Of course,
that you don't
listen.
Exactly.
The point I was making was we're past hooliganism. We're not making songs up about football hooliganism anymore. There's no point in this song which even hinted that you can say the line crying into in it, followed by we signed Federico and he's here to win. It's a football song about a football player. Yeah. And if you want to start like stoking the fire internally amongst each other, like if it's coming from Italy, I agree with you. The first thing we do is shut up. Yeah. We've done that in May. Yeah. But we sang it.
And there'll still be some people who won't. But then like you can leave those people to sort of But if you wanted to
write an article about it, or you wanted to try and educate people on it, it would be. This isn't about Heysel, and we're not about that anymore. That's the message, surely. Not let's all try and like point score and try and like link it to a tragedy, which it's not about.
My worry now is basically that like it's
ruined.
You're ruining something nice, but it's gonna continue to a point where then it does attract attention and it does become this like
becomes a divisive thing.
That's.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me, Gibbo. Like, I'm pleased that you sort of brought up the idea that like it could just be an old generation having to go at a young generation, because like I feel like we're always in danger of getting into these arguments, and I'm happy to talk about the fact that I was on a show with Ian Salmon last year where he called waving scarves around, and what he was trying to refer to, and I've already spoke about this I think on the Bacon Butty after it before, that he thought that Seller, Newcastle sponsor, Saudi sponsor by the way, putting scarves on seats and Newcastle waving them around was like Chelsea fan behaviour. That was, in his mind, was Wool behaviour. I am a Wool. Like what that fella commented on my Instagram is true. I'm from Cheshire. I'm not from Liverpool. My dad's a Scouser. I've talked about that on shows before, but that doesn't give me a right to say that I am a Scouser, or that I know the way Scousers think, or anything along those lines. If Ian Salmon thinks that's Wool behaviour, that's absolutely fine. The trouble with all these things, and why I think the sentiment was so strong to Ian at the time, and why I think it always gets so strong around these things in particular, is when any of these conversations become almost like a generation gap thing, or when they become a region gap thing, for want of a better phrase, where it becomes, oh no, like this is the way that Liverpool fans did this, and we don't want to tell Juve to fuck off. It's Wolves that are doing this, and Wolves that are perpetuating this behaviour.
Yeah, you can just get yourself in a mess with it, and that's what I don't want to do personally, and I don't want anyone else to do. And you talk about personal attacks. I don't take any delight about seeing Tony get attacked. You know what I mean? Like he is online, even though he's brought you into it and brought us into the article. Do you know what I mean? That's up to him. I'd rather he just rang me, to be honest with you. But whatever. That's not happened for whatever reason. And instead it's like I say, been a very front foot aggressive article, which is Tony's his way, and then other people have maybe haven't got Tony's platform, but have spoken a sort of similar way around it, and it just feels to me like it's attacking people who are younger, who are sort of maybe haven't lived the life that you have, but haven't lived all the experience that you have, but are saying that you should have all the same thoughts, you should have all the same behaviour. And listen, society's always been like that. When these people were young, they would have had older people going, oh, why are you doing like this? And do you know what? If you remember, you told them to fuck off. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so younger people are going to do that to you now and go, no, I'm not having someone who doesn't go to the game anymore tell me how should they behave at the match. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not holding your guilt. I'm not living in sort of these ways because you're sort of deciding that it should be. And we just need to find a way to let supporting Liverpool be fun. And that's the thing for me. It needs to be a laugh. And Friday was hard and it was emotional, and there was all the Jota stuff, and there was other stuff that I mentioned before as well. And then it got to be a great laugh. And then suddenly people just, it feels like, just want to go, nah, you can't do that because of this and that. There's a time and a place for discussion, and there's a way to have it. And I'm always fine of listening and learning, but just the way it's been done, I just think is out of order, and on people who have experienced things that I think a lot of the people who were on the attack probably haven't. Like, they probably weren't in Paris, or if they were, they weren't in those situations. They weren't necessarily at the parade. Yeah, if you connected with Liverpool, you would have felt the Jota thing. There's no hierarchy sort of on that really, but going the match has been hard, and going to games has been difficult. And Friday was emotional going, and then it was brilliant, and just let people enjoy that. And like you say as well, the footballer, fucking hell, do you know what I mean? How do you think he feels right now? Do you know what I mean? Is anyone sort of feeling about him? He's at elation, he's talked about loving his song.
He's dancing in front of the cop too.
And now people are saying, now people are saying to him, oh yeah, you should feel bad about
now
that.
He's got his goal.
But also, it might be the greatest example ever of a song lifting a footballer, like taking a footballer to a level, because like there might even be a shout that Slot, and I don't know if this is true, but there might even be a shout that Slot thought, do you know what? The atmosphere is sort of dimmed a little bit, but if I throw him on, they might sing a song and it might lift things, and so there has to be we just have to sort of approach these things in like a reasonable way. And I think, you know, I'm exactly, I don't know Tony, and like I don't like vitriol and people jumping on, you know, someone online anyway. It just like, it makes me really anxious, to be honest, because we do this, and at any stage you can say something, particularly on a show like this, and get people jumping on you. So to be honest with you, like, it makes me really anxious. But like, so I don't like that, but I think there's sort of, and this is as someone who doesn't know Tony and has seen these articles, most of the articles feel like they are of this tone, and so that's, you know, and so it doesn't feel like something that you can take, you know, with you know, in a sort of reasonable way, because I've read this tone of article time and time again, and I've seen this reaction to them. So yeah, but it's a really difficult, and it's been, and you say it's like, it's been a roller coaster in terms of everything that's happened since the end of the season, and then whenever you do this job, it sort of adds to it, like, it doesn't it, because you've got like so many of these things. Do you know what
I mean? Honestly, it feels like they've had the summer off.
So
whether you're unaware of it or whether you are aware of it, even me, I stand on stage as a singer. I had that filter before I went out in the Olympia after we won the league and singer. I didn't find anything wrong with the song. That's my opinion. I feel like that's the opinion of most of our fan base.
But they all sang it back.
Exactly. Well, he loves it. The fans love it.
All the players sang it then. And look, I'm not saying that fucking, you know, Andy Robertson, I'm not saying Chiesa should know the you know, like the story and understand our history to that. You know, he probably won't, and he probably won't understand the nuance in this sort of conversation that we're talking about, and aspects of the reaction from the people who've written these articles this week. But, you know, it's been something that at no stage the club has tried to dampen, and look, they can't really have to tell us to sing, you know. So yeah, it's.
Yeah, in the same way that Chiesa shouldn't carry that remorse, it's not going to be the thing I do. I'm afraid, like, you know, those people that are going to try and change my mind, that I'm sure is going to be, you know, more difficult conversations to come. It's a difficult conversation, and that's the thing. I think, you know, John talks about giving each other goodwill and giving each other space. It's a summer where we've all tried to do that, tried to be a support for each other, tried to give each other space to deal with everything that's been going on. There's going to be conversations that continue about this. I'd just encourage everyone who's watching to give each other a bit of grace when you have those conversations. Like Craig mentioned, the vitriol, the name calling, that sort of stuff. Like, if we can just pack that in. And I'm not speaking on any soapbox really. I'm lucky enough to have this platform through the Anfield Wrap where I can speak to you down a camera and have the cameras recording me and speak to these lads and hear good opinions on these things from, you know, match-going Liverpool fans whose opinions that I respect as well. But people who don't go to the match who love the Chiesa song, I'm going to listen to their opinions. People who do go to the match who don't like it, I'm going to listen to their opinions as well. And I'm going to give everybody space and grace, and I'd encourage everybody to do the same, because it's always going to be a difficult conversation. Heysel is always going to be a difficult conversation. The thing that shouldn't be difficult is supporting Liverpool Football Club and supporting the players who play for Liverpool, and that's all I'm going to say at the end of it.